She didn't walk in angry. She didn't walk in afraid. She walked in like a woman who knew exactly who she was and counted on no one else to know. The marble floor of the bank gleamed like pride polished into stone. Behind the glass partitions, men in ties laughed too loudly. A woman at the counter tapped long nails on the desk, waiting for someone she deemed important enough to acknowledge. But none of them saw her. Not as a leader, not as a name that could end their careers with a single sentence. Just another black woman. Alone. Quiet. Unremarkable. Until she tried to make a withdrawal, and the mask of politeness dropped, and the prejudice spoke. Out loud. We don't just hand out money to people like you. That's when the silence shifted. And everything changed. If you've ever walked into a room and been judged before you even spoke, if your skin has ever walked 5 steps ahead of your resume, then this story will feel like yours. Like, share, and stay, because we don't just tell stories, we reveal them. It was 9:15 a.m. on a Tuesday when Angela Freeman stepped through the revolving doors of the flagship branch, not as a CEO, not as a boss, but as a quiet test the staff would fail in real time. The glass doors whispered shut behind her. Angela Freeman stood for a breath too long in the lobby of Meridian Financial's flagship branch, not hesitating, just observing. The hum of fluorescent lights, the slow ticking of the lobby clock, the shuffle of shoes on polished marble, all of it felt familiar. Too familiar. 25 years ago, she had stood on the other side of this floor, wearing a burgundy polyester vest and a trainee badge, smiling through condescension, fetching coffee with a grateful nod. Now, she walked in wearing a navy hoodie not because she had forgotten who she was, but because she wanted to see who else had. No one looked up. Not the receptionist who twirled her pen absently. Not the 2 tellers gossiping in low tones between customers. Not the branch manager, half visible through frosted glass, laughing at something on her screen. Angela smiled faintly. Perfect. She crossed to the waiting area, her footsteps quiet but assured, and sat beneath the bank's newest security camera, the one she had personally approved last quarter. The irony made her exhale. Her eyes scanned the room, and slowly, deliberately, she began to watch. A white man in a tailored charcoal suit entered and was greeted at the door. "Good morning, sir." He didn't even have to cue. An elderly Asian couple was pointed silently to a kiosk with no offer of help. A young white woman in athleisure smiled at, ushered through. Light laughter. Then came a Hispanic man in a janitor's uniform, 3 forms of ID requested, and a teller's gaze that lingered too long. Angela took it all in, not judging, just measuring. After 15 minutes of watching, she stood up and adjusted the strap of her modest leather purse. No one saw her as anyone worth noticing. That would be their first mistake. She didn't wear her power today. She carried it quiet as oxygen, and oxygen doesn't announce itself. But when it leaves a room, you feel it. Angela stepped forward just as another customer was called. She moved to the next available teller, a young woman with a polished bun and a nervous energy that flared as soon as she looked up. Next, the teller said, then paused mid-breath when she saw Angela. Not alarmed, just suddenly alert, in that subtle, conditioned way. Angela offered a calm smile. "I'd like to make a withdrawal, please." She slid a printed withdrawal slip across the counter with her ID and bank card. The motion practiced, poised. Her voice was neutral, her posture upright, nothing threatening, nothing demanding, still. The teller's smile faltered, not vanished, but cracked. The number on the slip, $115,000, changed everything. Angela saw it happen. The quick flicker in the woman's eyes, the subtle tightening of her jaw, the shift from customer service to quiet suspicion. The teller didn't speak right away. She picked up the ID like it might stain her fingers, studied it, then Angela, then back again. "That's a large amount," she said finally, her tone carefully neutral, but it had a hitch in it, the kind of careful phrasing that always came before escalation. Angela didn't blink. Yes, It's well within the daily limit for this account type. The teller hesitated again, then leaned slightly to her right. Mark. She called quietly to the man one counter over. Mark older, stiff, with that weary authority of someone who'd been promoted too long ago and too little since stepped over. What's going on here, he asked, not to the teller, but to Angela. Already. The gaze had shifted. The suspicion wasn't hidden. It wore a name badge and a tone that said, "You don't belong here. Prove otherwise." Angela looked from one face to the next and said nothing. Let them speak first. Let them show who they really were. Mark picked up Angela's ID as if it were evidence in a case. He turned it over once, then again unnecessarily before offering a smile that didn't reach his eyes. We've been seeing unusual activity on these types of accounts lately, he said, his voice low and deliberate. These types, the phrase landed heavy in the air, like smoke that doesn't clear. Angela's eyebrow lifted a millimeter. Her voice, when it came, was velvet-wrapped steel. What types would those be? Mark didn't answer. Instead, he nodded to the teller. Beth, pull the account history. Let's see what kind of pattern we're working with. Beth's fingers moved hesitantly across the keyboard, but her eyes never rose from the screen as if avoiding Angela's gaze made her less complicit. Then came Richard, mid-30s, arrogant in that easy, unearned way. He leaned across from the next window, loud enough for others to hear. Probably one of those check-cashing schemes, he muttered to Mark. Then, louder. We've had some big withdrawals like this from settlements, or maybe lottery wins. He didn't say it. He didn't have to. In their minds, there was no version of this story where a black woman withdrew 6 figures for legitimate reasons. No backstory that included strategy, discipline, or earned wealth. Angela heard it all. The assumptions, the small cruelties, the murmurs that carried just enough weight to shape a room. Behind her, a mother pulled her children closer. An older man in uniform shook his head, lips pressed tight, not surprised, just tired. Angela adjusted the strap of her purse, took in the lobby, the cameras, the silence. Then she looked directly at Richard. Not with fury, but with something far more dangerous. Certainty. The rhythm of the lobby changed the moment Jessica Keller stepped out of her glass office. Heels sharp on marble, blazer tailored, hair coiled into the kind of tight bun that said, "I'm in charge," without needing to speak. But she did speak, and when she did, her voice was warm, polished, polite like sugar in tea brewed too strong. "Is there a concern at this station?" she asked. Not unkindly, but not addressing Angela either. She spoke over her, around her, as if she were a shadow, not a person. Beth looked up nervously, then gestured to the screen. Jessica glanced briefly, then turned to Angela, her smile fixed. "Ma'am, I understand there's some confusion about your request." Angela met her eyes, steady and without apology. "There's no confusion. I'm making a withdrawal. From my account." Jessica nodded slowly, the way people do when pretending to understand a language they never bothered to learn. "Well," she said, still smiling, $115,000 is a significant amount. May I ask what the funds are for?" The question hung in the air, casual, almost reasonable. But not a single other customer that morning had been asked it. Not the white man in the suit. Not the woman in yoga pants. Only her. Angela let the silence stretch, not because she didn't have an answer, but because the question itself was the answer. Jessica's smile faltered for just a moment. Then she added, lightly, "We do have to be cautious. We have a standard of clientele here." There it was. The veil dropped. Standard. Angela didn't react, didn't frown, didn't blink. Her silence didn't scream. It watched. And that made it louder than any answer ever could. Jessica Keller tilted Angela's ID between 2 fingers like one might hold a napkin someone else had used. She read the name slowly, her lips barely moving. "Mrs. Freeman," she said at last, voice coated with a synthetic concern. This amount doesn't seem appropriate for someone like you." The words didn't echo. They dropped like something dirty falling on clean marble. Angela didn't flinch, but Beth, the teller, did. She looked down, began rearranging a stack of deposit slips that didn't need straightening. Behind Jessica, Mark and Richard were no longer hiding their expressions. Richard snickered. Mark folded his arms with the slow, self-satisfied smugness of a man watching something he believes he controls. Jessica went on, now emboldened. "This branch prides itself on discretion, security, and a certain class of customer. If you're looking for cash, perhaps the check cashing place down the street might be more suited to your needs." A pause. The lobby, half filled with clients mid-transaction, grew oddly still. One woman clutched her purse. Another whispered to her son, who stared at Angela with confused curiosity. Angela's pulse didn't spike. Her breath didn't quicken. She simply placed her other hand beside the ID fingers, resting lightly, deliberately. "I'd like to speak with someone who can actually authorize this transaction," she said. "Someone with the authority to override whatever assumptions are being made." Jessica's smile froze tight as thread pulled too far. "There's no one higher than me here," she replied. Her voice dropped half a tone. "And ma'am, if you continue pressing this, I'll have to ask you to leave the premises." The moment cracked like glass in quiet heat. Angela turned slightly, eyes grazing the camera in the upper corner. Still, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to, because her silence wasn't surrender. It was a blade, and the room was already bleeding. Angela didn't argue, didn't plead, didn't explain her worth. She reached, calmly, into her purse. A small leather bag, the kind executives receive as retirement gifts, but never actually retire with. The staff watched her, not with concern, with amusement. Richard leaned toward Mark, lips barely moving. "She's calling a boyfriend," he mouthed, grinning. Mark chuckled. Beth's eyes flicked to Jessica, but the manager was already shaking her head, dismissing it all with the casual cruelty of someone who'd never been challenged from below. Angela placed the phone to her ear. "Yes," she said softly. "This is Angela Freeman calling." That sentence landed like a tremor no one felt until the walls began to shift. Richard stood straighter. Mark turned his head, confusion curdling his certainty. Angela's tone changed, not louder, just clearer. "I'm at the downtown branch. They've refused the withdrawal. Yes, I'll wait." Then she hung up. "1 second, 2. Jessica stepped closer. "You've made your point, ma'am," she said with forced calm. "But we can't just—" Angela raised a finger, not to interrupt, just to pause the performance. Then she said the name. "I've asked Diane Porter to join us." The breath caught in Jessica's throat wasn't audible, but Angela saw it. A flicker in the eyes, a twitch at the jawline, a name that meant power, real power. Diane Porter, head of operations, 1 rung below the board, and 3 above Jessica Keller. Behind the counter, Richard's smirk dissolved. Mark took a small step back. Beth suddenly looked like she wanted to melt into the floor. But Angela, she returned her phone to her purse, then folded her hands, then waited. Because now, the silence belonged to them. The double doors of Meridian's flagship branch didn't swing open. They exploded. A gust of wind followed the woman who walked in heels, echoing across the marble like war drums disguised as fashion. Navy suit, silver pin, tablet in one hand, security badge clipped like a blade. She didn't look around. She didn't ask for context. She knew. Because Diane Porter had already seen everything. From the 21st floor, through the network of cameras Angela had once insisted be upgraded. Audio, timestamps, multiple angles. Every blink, every word, every moment someone called her boss one of those types. Jessica Keller took a step back. She tried to rearrange her face professionalism. Calm, but it was too late. The room had changed temperature. The oxygen had shifted loyalties. Behind her, Richard straightened his tie. Mark looked for a screen to disappear into. Beth just froze. Diane moved with the grace of a woman who had nothing to prove and 1,000 receipts to show. She didn't speak to Jessica, not at first. She went straight to Angela, and her voice, when it came, was velvet-wrapped iron. I am deeply sorry you experienced this, especially here. Angela looked up, eyes steady. She didn't nod. She didn't need to. This moment wasn't about performance. It was about truth finally arriving on time. Then Diane turned, and when she spoke again, her voice filled the lobby like a verdict. This, she said, gesturing to Angela, is Angela Freeman, your CEO. There are silences that soothe, and there are silences that split a room. This was the second kind. Jessica Keller blinked once, twice, but the title didn't change. CO. The letters hung in the air like thunder that hadn't yet echoed. Angela Freeman. The woman they stalled, dismissed, humiliated. The woman they tried to send to a check-cashing place more suited to her needs. The same woman who now stood taller without moving an inch. Richard's mouth fell slightly open. His eyes darted to Mark, looking for confirmation as if maybe they'd misheard. But the truth had landed, and truth has a way of sticking. Beth's hands trembled. She dropped her pen. Didn't bother picking it up. Jessica took one shaky step back. This must be some misunderstanding. She managed, her voice now tinny and unconvincing. Diane's gaze was unflinching. No misunderstanding, she said. We've been watching for 17 minutes. We've seen every interaction, every deviation from protocol, every double standard. Behind them, the wall-mounted screen still glowed. Security footage, split view. A white man in a suit served in 2 minutes. A black woman in modest clothes denied her own money. The comparison wasn't hypothetical. It was visual, measured, undeniable. Jessica tried again, her tone shifting, now defensive. We were following security procedure. Diane cut her off. No, you weren't. Her voice was calm. But the calm was dangerous. The kind that comes just before systems are dismantled. Angela hadn't moved. She didn't need to. Because her stillness was no longer invisible. It was indictment. Angela stepped forward, not dramatically, but with the kind of poise that makes even the proud straighten their posture. She didn't look at the cameras. She didn't look at the growing crowd of customers. Some filming, some frozen. She looked at the three of them. Jessica, Mark, Richard. And then, for the first time since walking into the branch, she spoke with weight. Jessica, Mark, Richard, she said evenly, her voice clear, deliberate, like lines carved in glass. You are terminated, effective immediately. No gasp, no crescendo. Just the cold authority of a woman who didn't need approval to be believed. Jessica staggered, her mouth opened, but no words came. Mark turned pale. Richard, once smug, now stared at the floor, pen spinning silently between unsteady fingers. You have demonstrated, Angela continued, through your actions today, that you are fundamentally unfit to serve this institution, or its clients, or its values. She wasn't angry. That would have let them off too easily. She was resolved. This is not a suspension, not a review, not a training opportunity. This is the end of your employment with Meridian Financial. Jessica made one last, desperate reach. You can't just... Angela raised one hand, fingers open, palm calm. I can... She turned slightly. And I have... The words dropped like verdicts. And none of them, not even Diane, said another word. Angela looked to the security guard. He was young, new. His name tag read Thomas. He looked terrified. She nodded gently. Please escort them out. He obeyed, not out of fear. Out of clarity. The sound of their shoes, Jessica's, Mark's, Richard's, was the only thing that moved in the lobby. Even the cash-counting machines had stopped. It wasn't just a termination. It was an exorcism. As the three were led past stunned tellers, trembling interns, and customers pretending not to watch, Angela Freeman stood still in the eye of the storm she had never raised her voice to create. When the glass door closed behind them, there was no applause, no cheering, only the quiet shift of awareness. And that was louder than anything else. Angela turned, slowly, faced the remaining staff, a dozen or so employees standing in loose formation, like a team suddenly unsure of who they were playing for. Some looked ashamed. Some looked exposed. One or two looked relieved. She didn't ask for attention. It came to her anyway. And when she spoke, her voice wasn't hard. It was honest. "What happened here today," she said, "isn't just about 3 employees making poor decisions." Her eyes scanned the group, pausing, not accusing. It's about a culture that allowed those decisions to feel normal. Beth, the teller who had looked away, then down, then trembled, wiped at the corner of her eye. Angela continued, "It's not just this branch. It's not just this city. It's how systems survive by making bias feel like policy, and cruelty feel like caution." No one moved. Because sometimes, the deepest cuts aren't disciplinary. They're diagnostic. And Angela Freeman wasn't here to punish. She was here to correct. Angela took one step forward, not toward a podium, not to elevate herself, but to shorten the distance between her and the people who had watched this unfold. Some out of discomfort, some out of fear, some simply unsure of which way the wind now blew. She looked at Beth. The young teller's eyes were wide and rimmed with the shame of someone who knew better but hadn't acted soon enough. Angela didn't judge her. She remembered being that girl, quiet, compliant, hoping not to lose her job while watching someone else lose their dignity. So when she spoke again, her tone softened. "We all like to think we'd speak up when something's wrong, that we'd be brave. But most of us have been trained subtly, daily, to freeze." A few heads bowed. "It takes time to unlearn that," she added. "But starting today, that's exactly what we'll do." She turned toward Diane, who had been watching in silence, the tablet still in her hand, the screen now glowing with internal reports. Angela nodded. "Effective immediately. This branch will undergo a full culture audit." Whispers. She raised a hand. "No one is being punished without clarity. But no one will be protected by silence either." A shift rippled through the room, not fear, but recognition. Angela continued, her voice even. "We will review every hiring file, every promotion, every complaint, even the ones no one bothered to file." She paused. "And we will talk. Not once, not in a workshop, but consistently, loudly, truthfully. Because silence had protected too many people in this building. And starting now, it would protect no one." The tension in the room had thinned, not because it was over, but because something deeper had started. Angela let the moment settle, then turned again, this time to Beth. The young teller straightened unconsciously. Like a student bracing for correction in a classroom she thought she had failed. Her voice came before Angela's did. I'm so sorry," Beth said, eyes glassy. "I knew what was happening wasn't right, but I didn't know what to do. Jessica, She trailed off, embarrassed by her own explanation. Angela didn't interrupt. She let the silence stretch. And in that quiet, Beth seemed to hear her own words more clearly than anyone else could have. Angela stepped closer. "Learning to stand up to injustice," she said slowly, "especially when it's coming from someone with power, is one of the hardest things you'll ever have to do in this world." Beth nodded, almost instinctively. "But," Angela added, "it's also one of the most important." She paused. The room held its breath. Then she said it. "Effective immediately. Beth, you're being promoted to interim branch manager." Gasps. Even Diane's eyebrows rose, just slightly. Beth blinked. But I don't." Angela held up a hand, gently. "You saw the wrong. You felt it. And though you froze, you didn't excuse it. That's more than most people do. Now I want you to learn to move and lead from that place." Beth's hands shook. Not from fear anymore. From something more surprising. Belief. 3 days later, the cameras returned. But this time, they weren't hidden in corners. They were held by journalists, mounted on tripods, backed by sound crews and boom mics. Angela Freeman stood at a podium, the Meridian Financial logo gleaming behind her not as a prop, but as a battleground. She looked the part not in armor, but in tailored purpose. Her blouse a calm ivory, her voice steadier than any script. Today, she said, Meridian Financial announces a full-scale equitable banking initiative. The microphones leaned forward. This is not PR. This is not damage control. This is repair. Behind her, Diane Porter stood quietly, flanked by 3 board members. They hadn't all supported this. Some had pushed back. Too expensive, too public, too political. Angela had listened. Then she had shown them the footage. All of it. And in that conference room where egos once voted on policies, they had seen something undeniable. Their silence had become a liability. Now they stood with her. Visibly, deliberately. Angela continued. This initiative includes $50 million in training, oversight, and community reinvestment. We will audit every branch. We will disaggregate every customer experience. And we will ask questions no one wanted to answer. In the front row sat a small, unassuming group clients who had once filed complaints no one followed up on. A black entrepreneur denied a loan. A Latina mother told her documents were unclear. An elderly Asian man who'd waited 42 minutes for help. They weren't props. They were witnesses. And now, they were policy advisors. Angela didn't look triumphant. She looked ready. Because fixing a system doesn't start with solutions. It starts with truth. The press conference was over. The cameras packed. The applause folded into polite emails. The board smiled for the flash, then returned to their shadows. And that's when the real work began. Angela sat in the executive conference room, not the grand one for photo ops, but the war room low ceiling, high tension, and the stale scent of entitlement. She scrolled through the early rollout reports, branch audit templates, bias training schedules, exit interview transcripts newly surfaced from inactive files. It looked like momentum, but it smelled like stall. The first signs weren't loud. They came as CCs removed from emails, as policy drafts lost in the versioning system, as silence during meetings, not disapproval, but curated disengagement. It came from the veterans, the ones with 30 years and 0 promotions outside their circle, the ones who'd said all the right things at the press conference, but now raised concerns about the practicality of Angela's initiative. One email read, "Before we over-index on perception gaps, let's ensure these changes don't alienate our core clients." Angela stared at the phrase "our core clients." She'd seen this kind of language before, not in the policy manuals, but in the pauses between protocol and prejudice. She didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, she opened the staffing dashboards, filtered by race, gender, pay band, complaint frequency. The picture formed itself, and the numbers whispered what the words refused to admit. This wasn't just a culture problem. It was infrastructure. And she knew to fix something this deep, she couldn't yell. She had to redraw the blueprints, while everyone was still sitting in the building. Angela didn't send an angry memo. She didn't march into anyone's office with fists or fury. She did something quieter, smarter, more permanent. She changed the metrics. In her next executive directive, concise, clinical, unshakable, Angela outlined a new evaluation structure across the entire organization. No more bonuses tied solely to loan volume. No more performance reviews anchored in customer retention without context. No more top performers whose branches were bleeding clients of color. Instead, every leader from regional VPs to local branch managers would now be measured by something new. Equity impact scores. A composite of disaggregated customer satisfaction, complaint responsiveness, bias training completion rates, and internal diversity across hiring and promotions. For the first time in the bank's history, inclusion wasn't a paragraph in the code of ethics. It was a line on the spreadsheet that determined who stayed and who got replaced. And it hit like a quiet earthquake. Whispers spread fast. Did you see the new dashboard? They're tying equity to compensation now. Wait, is this retroactive? Yes, yes, and yes. The old guard blinked. Some scoffed behind closed doors. Others stared at the new fields on their KPIs, realizing they had no idea how to influence those numbers. Because you can't fake respect. And you can't game accountability. Angela didn't gloat. She kept her face neutral, her tone professional, her posture composed. But inside, she knew exactly what she had done. She had changed what this system called success. And now, it had to catch up or be left behind. Angela walked into the branch like any other customer. No press release, no entourage, no warning. Just a gray knit sweater, dark jeans, and her natural hair pulled back under a soft cap, the same modest purse, the same quiet eyes. She looked like someone with a question about her mortgage. Not the woman who had redrawn the blueprint of the bank from the top floor. This time, she didn't go to the flagship branch. She went to a smaller one, suburban, quiet, the kind of place where routine ran deeper than policy. The waiting area smelled of stale coffee and printed paper. A couple argued softly by the ATM. A teller smiled at a white customer walking in with no ID, no appointment, and walked him straight to a desk. Angela sat and waited. She had no appointment either. What she wanted couldn't be scheduled. She watched as an elderly black woman with a cane asked for help with a wire transfer. The teller's smile dimmed. Instructions got colder. Her questions barely tolerated. Angela's fingers curled slightly around the strap of her bag. Across the lobby, a younger black man hoodie, headphones around his neck, waited nearly 20 minutes to cash a check. She took it all in. The shifts in tone, the pause in politeness, the way smiles seemed to expire depending on skin tone and dress code. Then, finally, a young man at the counter called to her. "Ma'am, I can help you now." Angela stood, walked slowly toward the desk. Her silence, once again, sharpened like a blade hidden in soft cloth. She wasn't here to test them. She was here to see them. And to see if they had finally learned how to see her, too. The young banker gestured to a desk near the back. Angela walked with him in silence, feeling the room as much as she observed it. No one whispered this time. But silence has dialects. She sat across from him. He was polite, the polished kind. Crisp shirt, nervous smile, eyes darting between her and his monitor. "How can I help you today?" Angela didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at the nameplate on his desk, Ethan Cross, Client Specialist. Then she said, with a mild tone, "I'm considering moving a few accounts to a different bank. Thought I'd stop in and get a feel for how things work here." Ethan nodded, rehearsed. "Well, we're happy to assist. What kind of accounts do you hold?" Angela didn't blink. "Business? Personal? Trusts?" He hesitated, not long, but enough. His eyes scanned her sweater, her hands, her posture, then returned to her face. "Okay," he said slowly, typing something anyway. "Would you happen to have the names of the accounts or last 4 digits of any associated numbers?" Angela opened her purse and slid forward a card, not a flashy one, just a corporate account card with initials, no full name. Ethan stared, typed, then paused. Hard. His pupils dilated a fraction. His throat bobbed. She could tell he had seen it. Her name, her title, her access level. And now his voice trembled just slightly. I apologize. Mrs. Freeman, I didn't realize." Angela raised a hand, slow and deliberate. "Why would you need to—" He froze. She didn't say it as a rebuke. She said it like a mirror. And in that moment, the entire weight of this institution's change, all the policies, all the dashboards, all the pledges came down to this question. "Do you only give dignity to names you recognize?" Ethan sat straighter, visibly shaken. "I'm truly sorry, ma'am," he stammered. "That wasn't how I meant." Angela shook her head gently. Don't apologize for what you didn't say. She folded her hands, not in judgment but in clarity. Do you know the most consistent feedback I've read? Her voice was soft, measured. It's not about rude service, or errors, or delays. She leaned slightly forward. It's the feeling people get when they walk through that door and think, they looked at me like I didn't belong. Ethan's face flushed, not because he'd shouted, but because he hadn't seen it. Angela continued, You don't fix that with policies. You don't fix it with posters or mandatory training modules. Her eyes held his. You fix it by remembering that every person who walks in here is someone's mother, someone's brother, someone's future. She stood. The chair made no sound as it slid back. I'm not here to catch anyone, she added. I'm here to see if we've started catching ourselves. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't hand out warnings. She simply placed a folded slip of paper on Ethan's desk. It read, You are seen. Now go see others. Then she walked out. No press. No signature sent. Just the sound of the front doors easing closed behind her, and a young man at a desk, wondering how it felt to be trusted by someone who could have ended his career with one sentence, but chose, instead, to teach him how to begin again. The thing about culture is it doesn't change in applause. It changes in whispers. In who gets greeted first when the line is long. In who gets believed when a mistake is made. In who gets looked in the eye. And who gets looked over. Weeks after Angela's silent visit, something shifted across Meridian branches. It didn't come with a headline or an email from corporate. It came when a black father in a denim jacket walked into a branch in Charleston, and the teller didn't ask for extra ID. She just smiled and said, Good morning, Mr. Davis. How can we support you today? It came when an older Latina woman called customer service in Dallas and didn't get transferred 3 times. She got an answer, and she got it in Spanish. It came when a Sikh man in Sacramento opened a small business account, and the branch manager personally came out to welcome him not because he was high net worth, but because he was new, and she understood the weight of being new and different. No one wrote about these things. But Angela noticed, because she wasn't looking for numbers. She was listening for tone. In one branch, a poster appeared in the break room, not printed by HQ, handwritten, taped to the wall. Don't serve names, serve people. In another, an assistant manager began starting staff meetings with one question. Tell me about the last time someone made you feel unseen and what you did about it. They didn't call it training, but it was. Not the kind that checks a box, the kind that unboxes people. At the flagship branch, Beth stood behind the glass office she once feared to enter. Now, the nameplate on the door read, Bethany Lee, Interim Branch Manager. She hadn't asked for it, hadn't campaigned, hadn't planned. But when Angela handed her that chance, she didn't take it as a gift. She took it as an obligation. Her first few weeks were awkward. The staff didn't trust her. Some thought she was a placeholder. Others thought she was a warning. She only got that job because of what happened. They whispered, She's soft. She froze that day. Everyone saw it. Beth heard them, every word. But instead of defending herself, she started listening harder. Not to excuses, to patterns. Who got assigned to the high-volume clients, whose lunch breaks were interrupted most often, whose mistakes were forgiven, and whose were documented. She started writing it down. Not to report people, but to understand the architecture of bias. And then she started calling it out calmly, factually, in one-on-ones, in performance reviews, in morning huddles. Why did you redirect that customer to the kiosk when you walked the last 2 people to the desk? I noticed we haven't approved a single loan application this month from women under 30. Why is that? No raised voice and no accusation? Just pressure. And pressure, when steady enough, becomes gravity. One day, a younger teller pulled her aside. I saw you hesitate that day. I thought, you froze. Beth nodded. I did, she said quietly. But silence taught me something. And now I speak so no one else has to freeze like that again. Angela sat in the corner office, the one with glass on 3 sides and silence on all 4. The skyline blinked with red lights from nearby towers. Behind her, a plaque read, "Leadership is not control. It's who you prepare to lead after you're gone." She had chosen that quote years ago, before she knew how hard it would be to live it. Now, she stared at her screen, a short list of internal candidates, a shorter list of external ones. Diane Porter had submitted a full transition memo. It was time. Not to leave, but to reconfigure what leadership looked like. Angela clicked open a draft email, subject succession plan building what lasts. She didn't write retirement, didn't write stepping down. She wrote, "I believe leadership has a half-life. It glows brightest when you teach others to hold the light." Below that, she listed names. Not just for CEO, but for every regional role, for every shadowed position where bias had once set the temperature. She chose people who weren't loud in the boardroom, but who asked the right questions in hallways. People who didn't talk about inclusion, but hired it, promoted it, and took responsibility when it faltered. Then she opened another folder. Inside a proposal, Equity Leadership Academy. A year-long training track, not on compliance, on courage. Built for those who'd been overlooked, not because they lacked skills, but because they didn't speak the language of the room fast enough. Angela didn't plan to walk away. She planned to build exit ramps for others, and bridges for those never invited to the table. And she knew if she did it right, they wouldn't need her name on the wall. They'd carry it forward in policy, in posture, and in the way they held the door for the next to arrive. The conference room smelled like fresh toner and bad coffee. Folding chairs. Fluorescent lights. A poster on the wall with the bank's values, printed in Helvetica and laminated in good intentions. Angela sat in the back row. No title, no badge, just a spiral-bound orientation packet and a name tag that read, Anna F. Let them underestimate her. That had always been her favorite view. At the front of the room, a young HR coordinator in a sage green blazer flipped to the next slide. "Welcome to Meridian Financial. We don't just value diversity, we operationalize equity." Angela tilted her head slightly. Not bad. The room had about 30 new hires tellers, junior analysts, phone reps. Most looked barely out of college. One was a middle-aged single mom. Another wore a hijab and scribbled notes like each line held weight. The trainer continued. "Let's talk about unconscious bias." Angela watched. Not the slideshow, the room. Who shifted uncomfortably, who nodded reflexively, who met the eyes of others when examples were given, who didn't. Then came the breakout exercise. Each table was given a fictional scenario, a difficult client, an ambiguous tone, a borderline comment from a colleague. Angela's group leaned in. The girl next to her, maybe 23, read the prompt aloud. "A well-dressed black woman is requesting a withdrawal of $75,000. She's calm, direct, and provides full ID. But something about her makes your colleague escalated. What do you do?" Silence. Then someone chuckled nervously. "That sounds familiar," the girl said. "Wasn't there a CEO who got mistaken for—" She trailed off. Angela said nothing. Just listened. Because this room didn't need her leadership. It needed her silence and her witness. The session ended with polite applause and a tray of lukewarm cookies. Angela stood slowly, gathering her things. She didn't rush. The girl who'd read the scenario aloud lingered too. She had a bright scarf, chipped nail polish, and eyes that noticed everything. She looked over and smiled. Wild. Right, that withdrawal example, I mean. Kinda obvious what they were getting at. Angela returned the smile, obvious to some. The girl nodded, then hesitated. "I'm Maya. First job out of school. You." Angela folded the name tag and tucked it into her purse. "Been around a while?" Maya laughed. "Nice. You seem calm." Angela raised an eyebrow, amused. Maya continued. "Honestly, I was nervous about joining a bank. Like, I didn't grow up with money, and most of the places I've worked, I felt like I had to prove I belonged there before anyone even said good morning. Angela's eyes softened. Belonging shouldn't be a daily battle. Maya exhaled. Exactly. They walked together toward the elevator. I like that they talked about real stuff in there, Maya added, like bias, customer mistreatment, stuff most places pretend doesn't happen. Angela nodded slowly. It only matters if it shows up when no one's watching. Maya looked puzzled. What do you mean? Angela smiled. When you're tired, or behind on schedule, or your manager isn't looking, that's when the culture shows itself. Maya chewed on that. Then the elevator arrived. As they stepped in, Maya glanced over. Hope we both stick around. I think this place is trying. Angela pressed the ground floor button. I think so too. The doors closed. And for the first time in a long time, Angela felt something rare. Relief. The courtyard behind headquarters was quiet that morning. Angela Freeman stood beneath the old oak, the one she used to pass when she was just a junior manager, walking in early, leaving late, barely noticed. Now, the tree had grown broader, its roots deeper, its shade softer. At its base, newly installed, sat a small brass plaque, unannounced, unpublicized. It read, "To those who lead quietly, to those who stand without applause, you are not invisible. You are the reason this place stands." No name. No date. But she knew. And so did Diane, standing a few steps behind her. "You sure you don't want a farewell speech?" Diane asked. Angela shook her head. "I gave my speech." In silence. It echoed loud enough. They stood there for a while, letting the wind move through the branches. Behind them, inside the building, a new hire opened the doors for a client, smiled first, asked a question without presumption. Small, ordinary, and exactly right. Angela turned to go. Her car wasn't waiting. No cameras followed. Just her, walking at her own pace. And as she reached the sidewalk, a woman in scrubs passed her tired eyes, fast steps, modest purse. Angela opened the door to the cafe ahead of them and held it open. The woman looked up, surprised. "Thank you." Angela smiled. "You're welcome." Because that's where all of this began. And that's where all of this returns. Not in headlines, not in boardrooms, but in how we treat people when we think no one is watching. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps us bring more powerful stories of empathy, justice, and silent strength to life. Your support is what fuels this journey. Let's keep standing together and rising higher, one story at a time. Stay safe and inspired.